I have to be hopeful because I live this. I jumped off the cliff. I'm doing this on behalf of all the other women in the world who've never been heard from before. And every morning when I wake up, there are days I don't feel hopeful. But I look down on my wrist in a bracelet that I wear that says, "Be fierce." And those two words, they motivate me, whether I'm tired or whatever the case may be, and I don't feel like doing anything that day. They motivate me to remember that this is my mission.
Hello, dear friends and damn givers. Welcome to the Let's Give a Damn podcast. I'm your host, Nick Lapara, and this is the show where I sit down for meaningful conversations with people who aim to build fewer walls, longer bridges, and bigger tables with their lives and work. My guests want to leave the planet better than they found it. And I truly hope today's conversation gives you hope and pushes you to give more damns than ever before. Now, this podcast releases on November 3 in the year of our Lord 2020, one of the most important election days in American history. Friends, I'm not being dramatic when I say that. I don't say that lightly at all. I truly believe that. And for my friends listening all over the world, I'm sorry that I'm speaking yet again about the American presidential election, but this is big time. And depending on where you live around the world, this may affect you also. 4 more years of Donald Trump and America will be virtually unrecognizable. Again, not dramatic, just real. Now, let me be clear. America has never been able to attain who and what America set out to be from the very beginning. America has never achieved America's stated vision and mission at all. But 4 more years of Donald Trump, and we will be set back way more than we already are. James Baldwin has this sobering line where he says that the horror is that America changes all the time without ever changing at all. Sit on that for a second. But before I get too preachy, because I have a lot to say there, let's move on. I want to stay focused. By the time you listen to this, it's likely that you already know who the next president is. So, a few quick words before we jump into today's conversation. Regardless of who our next president is, this country, the United States of America, is so deeply divided, so deeply polarized. And as I stated in the last podcast, we all need to be healers and we all need to be healed. Let me say that in the right order. We all need to be healed and we all need to be healers. The real work begins on November 4, the work of building fewer walls, longer bridges, and bigger tables. The work of focusing on the million things going on around us that a president, regardless of who he or she is, can never touch. The work of taking bold steps toward becoming a damn giver. Again, quoting James Baldwin, because I love James Baldwin, not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. Let me say that one more time. Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. So, I hope you're with me. I hope you're ready to join me in giving more damns than ever before. I have so much more to say on this, but I'll probably do a one-off monologue show soon to share more thoughts. You didn't come here for my rants on the current state of America. You did, however, come for my guest this week. I can't tell you how honored I am to have spent time with this incredible woman. My guest today is none other than the incredible Gretchen Carlson. Now, most of you know her already, so I won't spend a ton of time describing who she is, what she has done, what she is doing. But a few things. Gretchen has had a stunning on-camera career that has spanned local and national TV alike. Her latest on-camera run was at Fox News. And as most of you already know, she boldly spoke up about the abuse she was experiencing from Fox chairman Roger Ailes, Fox News chairman Roger Ailes, and her decision to speak up ultimately led to the downfall of this puny, pathetic man masquerading as a media tycoon. There are so many things she can't say in our conversation about what happened and what's going on, what has happened since then because of an NDA. So we stay pretty surface level. But it is precisely because of that NDA, that thing that is preventing a sexual abuse survivor from speaking out and sharing her story in the abuse she experienced, That NDA is what ultimately led her to start Lift Our Voices last year, a nonprofit initiative dedicated to creating positive, systemic change in the American workplace through the eradication of non-disclosure agreements for toxic work issues and mandatory arbitration clauses. She was named one of Time Magazine's 100 most influential people in the world, not the US, the world. She's the author of the amazing book, Be Fierce, which every one of you should read. It's fantastic. It's hard because it's her sharing stories of women that have been abused, and most of them have never received justice, but it's fantastic and it's very informative. Read it. She also just launched a podcast called Get the News with Gretchen, and she just joined People, the TV show, as a contributor so she can continue to highlight stories of amazing women. And I love one of the things that she has plastered all over her website, and she says all the time, one woman can make a difference, but together we rock the world. Gretchen is a force to be reckoned with, my friends. I could have talked with her for hours, but we had some time constraints. So 50-ish minutes is what you're getting today. That'll have to do for now. We'll probably do it again some other time. So let's get right into it, shall we? You can reach me anytime and for any reason by texting 646-328-6414 or by sending me an email at hello@letsgiveadamn.com. Now, here is my conversation with incredible human and damn giver, Gretchen Carlson. Let's go. Gretchen Carlson, welcome to the Let's Give a Damn podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me. I do give a damn about being here today. And I'm so glad we finally got this going, Nick, because we've been meaning to do this for a long time.
It's been a couple years, and the team has been amazing, trying to make it happen. You were off for a while. We missed each other in New York. We're finally doing it. I am so thrilled to speak with you. You're a hero of mine, a hero of so many, and I'm excited to dive in, not just to the things that make you super well known. I want to spend a few minutes here at the beginning before we get into the big stuff, right? The things that made you a household name, for better or for worse. I want to go all the way back for a second. I always love, with my guests, we're in the 170, 180 guests so far. I always love to go back and spend a few minutes on the beginnings, right? Because I think so much of what happens to us when we're growing up, our parents, the influences, our aunts, uncles, siblings, the people and places and things that shaped us into who we are today. So without giving you any more direction than that, can you spend a couple minutes giving us a framework, a picture for where you came from?
Yeah, thanks so much. I really love that question because I'm still blessed to have my parents in my life, actually. And they have been my rock and my foundation. And you're so right. They really formulated, I think, who I became, the good, bad, and the ugly. But I grew up in a small town in Minnesota. It's called Anoka. It's outside of Minneapolis. Its claim to fame is that it's the Halloween capital of the world. I know, that's pretty cool, right?
And here we are, right a couple days before Halloween.
I know. And so Halloween was like a huge, big deal in my small little hometown. But it really was, it's actually Lake Wobegon. If you've ever read any Garrison Keillor books, he actually grew up in my same town. So Lake Wobegon is actually Anoka. And, I grew up with the Protestant work ethic. My grandfather was a Lutheran minister. My other side of the family, they were car dealers. And, everything was just about family, love, and hard work, to be honest with you. So I grew up knowing that if you put time into something, you got better at it. And that's how you learn discipline and self-esteem. So I started that early on with the violin, just on a fluke. I started playing the violin and it just clicked, and I became really serious really quickly. So as a kid, I was a concert violinist. That was what I wanted to do in my life when I grew up. But my life has worked in really mysterious ways, and it zigzagged all over the place. And so I didn't end up doing that. But I had this wonderful Midwestern upbringing that I credit to this day, my Midwestern sensibilities, with getting me through almost any difficult moment in my life.
We have one thing in common here. I wasn't born in the Midwest. I was born in New York, raised in Guatemala, but my first 4 years of marriage from 2008 to 2012 were in Minneapolis.
Really?
So I know Anoka really well.
Oh my gosh.
And we loved Minneapolis. I'll never move back there, not for any terrible reason. It's just not home. But man, I loved those 4 years. I still have such fond memories of Minneapolis. And I would make excuses every Saturday night, not excuses like lying to my wife, but I would always make an excuse to go out on a drive on Saturday night to listen to Prairie Home Companion
That's
with Garrison Keillor. Cause I wanted to drive around and listen to it. Like I wanted to be in the car driving around listening to it. So we could probably we won't, but we could probably talk for hours about Minneapolis and Minnesota and the surrounding area. It's just a beautiful, beautiful place.
It is. And it's really interesting that you say that, because people who have never been to Minnesota, they're like, oh gosh, it's like the Wild West and it's just way too cold. And then they come to visit or they move there and they don't want to leave.
Yeah.
So that was my upbringing. But, I did leave when I was 17 and I've never lived there full time since. And it's not really because I don't want to. It's because my television career took me in a direction where I really wanted to try to achieve as much as I could. And that was going to be Los Angeles or New York. And so there's really no reason for me other than family to move back there. And it's so funny because I'm still a huge sports fan of all the Minnesota teams and especially the Vikings. And so early on when my kids would be rooting for the New York Giants, I'd be like, hey, and then I'd be like, oh yeah, you live here. Because I just had this mindset, like, you have to be a Vikings fan. And my son, just to really get under my skin, will bet me every Sunday, and he always roots against the Vikings. And until this year, he finally has the running back on his fantasy team. So I'm like, okay, they're good.
There you go. We're mixing it up.
They're having a terrible season, so I don't know what that means.
But let's be honest, that's more seasons than not. Terrible season, unfortunately. I love the Minnesota Vikings fans because, yes, they've had some winning seasons for sure, but I loved the diehardness. Like we moved to Seattle right after that for 4 years. And I moved there the years that like Russell Wilson entered the picture and they like started to really like come back. So I was there for some like winning seasons. It's like, well, it's easy to be a Seahawks fan right now. Everybody loves the Seahawks. But so much about Minnesota. It's so cold. It's so many things. And the fans there, the Viking fans, were just everything. They were so diehard about it. And I never got into it there. I'm not a big sports fan. I grew up in Guatemala. So football, the actual football, soccer was my sport that I watched and played. But I did love being around sports fans in Minnesota. They're really hardcore, really diehard.
They are. And I like to say we're not fair weather fans. At least I'm not. Like I've stayed tried and true. We have another commonality though. My nephew is from Guatemala.
Oh.
Yeah. My sister adopted a little boy from Guatemala about 14 years ago. And
that's beautiful.
And so they've been to the country as well. So anyway, we're finding all these similarities.
Yeah, there you go. So when did you first realize, at what age and where were you when you realized, okay, I want to be on TV? Because most people know you from TV. You've been on TV for a few decades now, right? 2 decades, 3 decades, right?
Almost, yes.
Almost.
So I was always intrigued by television because when I was spending all this time practicing the violin as a kid, sometimes TV stations would come out and do stories on my competitions or, just every so often I was featured on something with television, and I was intrigued by television that way, from behind the scenes and how they put stories together. And there's a lot of similarities. People will say to me, well, you didn't end up doing the violin in life. You ended up in TV. Like, how the heck does that happen? There are actually a lot of similarities with regard to performance. And so the way I equate it is that when the red light comes on the camera for TV, it's like walking out on the stage to perform with the symphony. Sure. It's sort of the same feeling of being in front of an audience, even though you can't see the TV audience. And it's weird because that's my comfort zone. That's all I knew as a kid. So I was well trained to be just enough nervous to be at my best.
There you go.
I think is really important. You still have to have some nerves, but doing TV, like, to me is just second nature now. And I think a lot of that came from my life as a violinist.
Yeah, I understand that. Not to the depth at which you're talking about, but I've done lots of these conversations. Like 10 episodes in, I got connected with Rainn Wilson, and I've had Chelsea Clinton on a few times. And so I got to like be with some, sort of bigger players, as it were. And I've given a TEDx talk, so I know that feeling. That's a whole story. And just last weekend, we shot the pilot for my TV show. So I'm doing like a hosted TV show, kind of a bigger, expanded version of the podcast, right? Where we're going to tell stories of people giving a damn. But I remember I feel pretty comfortable in my skin. I'm an Enneagram 8. I'm a type A. I'm very eccentric, very extroverted. So I've never like dealt with nerves. And so leading up to the TV show pilot, right? It was my truly genuine, like a production company's putting a bunch of money into this pilot. It's a real thing that's happening in spite of COVID and all that. We had a, pretty awesome crew that was safe and all that stuff. But everybody was like, are you nervous? Like, this is a big thing depending on you, using your ability to ask questions and talk to people and pull stories out. And I did not feel nervous. The way I described it was, it's almost similarly to what you just said. Like, I feel the weight of this. So it's not nerves. It's just like, holy shit, this is a big thing that if I mess up, there's a lot of things. There's a ripple effect here, right? In your case, it's a whole TV studio. It's a whole bunch of stuff where it's like, if I don't perform right here and do well at what I'm good at, what they hired me to do. So I understand that. I don't feel nerves. I didn't feel nerves last weekend, but boy, did I feel the weight of like, everybody's putting themselves at risk here to make this TV show. We're doing it all safe and everything, but there's money and there's people and tremendous talent involved to make this show go off. And now I got to do it. I
know, but when you talk about that, it makes me think about how many great lessons about life that I've learned from being part of a television production. Even though I might be front and center, there are so many people behind the scenes that make it all happen. And that's why I'm always really grateful that I had all these years in the trenches. That the television industry has changed so dramatically with, like reality stars now become famous on reality shows. And then the next thing you know, they're on a national TV show that I like killed myself to get on for 20 years. It's like, it totally changed, but I'm always grateful that I spent 2 years in Richmond, 2 years in Cincinnati, 5 years in Cleveland, 2 years in Dallas, 5 years at CBS News, 11 years at Fox, because when I finally did get to the national level, I would look around at all the people that it took to put on my show. And I'd be so grateful to them, number one. But number two, I'd done all those jobs. So I understood that I couldn't be in the position that I was in unless I had the editor and the sound person and the producer. And the list goes on. And you know that now from your experience in radio and TV. It takes a village. And so I've watched people in the business not come up that way and therefore think it's all about them. And they fail. They ultimately fail because they realize too late that it's about having this whole team come together. So anyway, I'm just passing along some sage advice to you as you venture into TV, which I'm sure you already know that it's a group effort, even though there might just be one person who's actually on camera.
Yeah, no, that's a lesson I've learned in more ways than one, not just with the TV thing. I was just talking with my podcast producer this morning, a guy that took a chance on me when I started the show 3 years ago and couldn't really, I've paid for it all along, but couldn't really pay for it. This is before I was on a network. And he worked with me. And yes, like I told him again this morning as we were on a call, like, I'm so grateful that you didn't say, well, this doesn't all line up. Like, you're not that experienced. You can't pay me my like going rate. So I'm not gonna go for it. And so no, I'm not 20 something years into this, but I am a few years and enough to know that it does indeed take a village. So many lessons there. I love that. Okay. So we have so much to get through in the next 45 minutes. We're going to try to do it. Okay.
Okay.
You have so much to teach us, and you didn't ask for this, right? The things that happened to you you really quickly spouted off all of these, years that you spent going all over the country with these jobs, right? Then you finally got to this national level, and some things happened over the years that resulted in sort of I don't know any other way to explain it than like an explosion happened in 2016. You were put in the impossible spot of, do I keep shutting up like everybody else has? Or do I speak out and risk losing everything? Right? Because historically, that's what happens. And people know, and you'll get to share some of the context here. I'm kind of being vague at this point. I expect that most people know what's going on at this point. But historically, you speak up about something that someone in power did to you, and you lose it. This is going on for as long as history has gone on. typically men in power have taken advantage of people that are not in power, and they get away with it over and over and over again. It's been this like weird thing that we can keep seeing over and over again in history. And there have been a few blips on the radar, and these are these people that stand up and say, hell no, not going to take it any longer. I might lose everything, but I'm going to speak up anyway. So people can go back and look at your career, all the things you've done. We're not going to talk about that today, because not that that's not important. It's made you who you are today. It's supremely important. But let's start. What led up to you speaking up a few years ago that ultimately led to the taking down, the downfall of one of the most powerful men in media? I mean, it's truly, we're not talking about some sort of unknown company, some unknown entity in the business world or in the media world. We're talking about the biggest of the big. So what sort of happened? What was happening in your life at the time that led to you saying enough is enough? Here we go.
Well, first of all, I grew up a gutsy kid. So somewhere deep in my fiber, I learned how to speak up for myself at a young age. Not that that always makes it just easy to jump to the top of the line and be like, hey, I'm being sexually harassed. I can hardly wait to tell somebody. Because listen, as you point out, what typically has happened to women who find the courage to do that is that they promptly get blacklisted, demoted, and fired. And every effort is made inside companies to protect predators. Don't get me started on why culturally we do that. That's what I'm trying to change now.
Yes.
But that has been the MO of what has happened to women in the past. And we all know that. And that's why women don't come forward. And that's why companies probably secretly really love that, because they pretend like they don't have any problems. So I can't tell you all the details, which is the other part of all the work that I'm doing.
Yeah, and we'll get to that. Yeah.
I want to make sure women aren't muzzled anymore, like I am, about not being able to tell you all the details. But people can go and they can see my lawsuit against Roger Ailes, former CEO and chairman of Fox News. My attorneys figured out a way to make the story public, file a public lawsuit. They can go and look at the details in the lawsuit. But the basic fact of the matter was that after I had killed myself to get to this national level, at Fox News, when I realized that that career was going to be taken away from me and it was not my choice, that I finally realized that if I don't stand up and speak up about this and say something, who will? And so I did. But I'm making it sound like it was just like the night before. And I was like, oh, I think I'll make this huge, mountain decision and jump off a cliff by myself without a safety net. This took a tremendous amount of, forethought. I have to be careful with my words. A tremendous amount of support from my family. This was not, I equate it to when you walk into a room and turn on a light switch. It's not like that. It's not as simple as walking into a room and being like, hey, I think I'm going to do this, and now there's light. This takes a tremendous amount of planning and determination that you're doing the right thing. My parents were huge in this. I'll never forget the night they called me months before. They called me and we all cried together on the phone. And they finally said that Gretchen, we're behind you on this. Because, let's face it, we talked about Minnesota. People don't sue each other in Minnesota very much. Mm-hmm. There's like this whole Minnesota nice thing. So getting my parents to understand what it was, and, finally that night when they said to me, you have to do this. We always want to please our parents. And I'm not saying that you should make every decision in life to please your parents, but let me tell you something. That was huge when my parents said they were with me. And then, of course, my immediate family. I didn't tell my children till the night before. I couldn't tell anyone except my husband and my lawyers. And it was tough. They were my paramount concern. And I had no idea, Nick, this is the thing. Hindsight is 2020. I had no idea how this was going to play out. Like, what was going to happen the next moment after I filed this lawsuit? What was going to happen the next day? What was going to happen the next week? I knew what had happened to women before. They were maligned. Nothing good really happened. But I hearkened back to this 5-year-old little girl who learned how to stick up for herself. And determined that if I don't do this, I don't think anyone else might. And I need to. And
That's
that's it.
it's so tragic that you felt like no one else was going to do it with you and for you, right? Like you had to do it yourself. That to me is one of the most tragic things. I have worked over the years with various kinds of survivors, whether it's sexual assault, sexual abuse, rape, all like so many different kinds. And these are people that I love and cherish. And most of them I met after the fact and have come alongside and helped them. But in almost every case, it's the same thing. It is, they felt so alone. And even if they had people around them supporting them, their loved one, some loved ones or whatever, a lot of them were hurt, abused by family members. So that there was that, right? Like you have this blessing where you can, you have, your husband and your kids and your parents, right? That could support you. Some of the people I've had I don't even know what word to call it, have been able to help through these things. It was their family that hurt them. It was their parents. It was these people close to them. And feeling that way, that you have no one to support you. And you brought up one other thing as well, that this has happened so many times over and over and over again. And now you're in the position where you're not able to speak all the details, right? And so you feel free at any point in this conversation to say, we can't go there, or I can't speak more into that. But that sucks. That sucks that you're in the position where you're having to measure your words. You're the victim here. You were the one that was abused, and you have to measure your words and hold back. Like that to me is one of the biggest, most egregious, most horrible things about this, is that you as a survivor, as someone who has been abused by those in power, can't tell it all.
Right. I can't shout it from the mountaintops. So that's what I'm trying to change, because what I learned, so I learned so many things, right away.
Yeah, I'm sure.
First of all, that I survived. I survived the first night. I survived the second night. My gosh, I was so thankful for other women who found the courage at Fox to talk to investigators. I mean, first, let me back up. They started an investigation. What? Like my lawyers and I never dreamed they would start an investigation. And then other women, I know they were so scared. And even if they only told 15% of what they knew, it was enough. So, about 20 other women came forward. And see, that's what companies want you to feel like. They want you to feel alone. They don't want you to know that there might be other people. And that's exactly, I think, how everyone felt. And then once somebody, pulled the pin out, they were all like, well, maybe I'll say something too. And so then I started hearing from so many women all across our country, from every profession and every socioeconomic background. And I was like, oh my God, this is a pervasive epidemic. I didn't even know that. This is what's happened to our culture, is that we have pushed this under and away, and we gave off this aura and feeling that women had finally made it, and that we were finally equal and we didn't have sexual harassment problems anymore. And one of the reasons that this movement and cultural revolution, as I like to call it, continued is because the American public got freaking pissed off, because they started hearing about these stories and they were like, I thought we had solved this a long time ago. And they realized we hadn't. And they wanted to learn more about it. And so I look at three things that kept the movement alive, which was the media. They finally started covering stories.
Yeah.
Sexual harassment. 4 years ago, Nick, they would have never, I'm a member of the media, and I can say nobody gave a flying you-know-what, okay? Number two, the American public got mad. They wanted to hear more about it. And number three, social media. Social media helped ignite this firestorm where people could either put their name and face to their stories, or they could be anonymous. And those are the three factors that have kept it alive. And then, then I realized, oh my gosh, this is not just me, it's everywhere. And I wanted to help these women. So then I wrote my book, Be Fierce, to give them a voice, because nobody else gave a flying shit about them ever before.
Yep.
And finally, they were like, would you please tell my story? And so that was really important to me. And then I was like, okay, how do I fix this? Yeah. Now that is a tangled web.
Yes. And we're going to get into we're going to spend a few minutes here in a minute on the things that you're trying to do, right? Like nothing is guaranteed, but you're, I think, in a better position than ever because of the things you just mentioned, because of your own boldness, because of your own gutsiness that you talked about that you've grown up with, you're in a position to change things. You could radically change things. You and those that have decided to join you. You mentioned something a few seconds ago about people getting so fed up, right? And they were like, how are we still dealing with this? That's one of my, so I told you I didn't grow up here. After growing up in Guatemala, I spent 6 years traveling the world, finally came back here to live. I've still spent a lot of time traveling abroad, but I came here as like my primary residence in my mid-20s. And that's been one of the mysteries to me of how progressive America tries to tout itself, right?
Mhm.
But America's seems so, James Baldwin, one of my favorites, and he has this quote. He's speaking on the issue of race, but I think it's true overall. He has this great quote that says, America is always changing, but America never changes, right? Like America, it always talks about these changes, right? Whether it's race, whether it's sexual harassment, whether it's all these things, we're always wanting to get better, and yet we never do, right? This summer, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, we're holding the same exact damn signs that women in Selma, Alabama held in 1960. 60 years later, same signs. That's not change. That's not progress. We have the intellect, we have the resources, we have the people, we have the manpower, the woman power. We have all the stuff we need to change, and we don't. And that's one of the great mysteries of the United States of America, is that we're always changing, but we never change.
Right. Well, until now, I actually believe that this cultural revolution of dealing with sexual harassment in the workplace and emboldening women to come forward led to the BLM movement finally being taken more seriously.
Yeah.
I actually believe it played a role in other groups feeling empowered that their voice matters, like the Parkland school shootings. Those kids realized that their voices mattered, right? And so people started listening to them about that. And I see these parallel tracks running now with each of these different movements. They're so very different, but they are so very much the same as well. And I think what I love about all of them is that I don't think they're going away this time. And so that gins me up every morning to realize that I'm not doing this alone anymore, right? There's all these other movements where people are finally saying, this is going to stick this time.
Talk about so this thing blows up in 2016, and you're sort of day to day right now, figuring out how's this thing going to play out. Between then and when you started Lift Our Voices, this wonderful organization, what was that journey to that point? What were the kinds of things you were doing in between there that led you to the point where, because again, nobody would have blamed you for sinking back into obscurity and just living your life, because you've already been through so much. You at this point are, great at your job that you can get a job anywhere doing anything. But you decided to really to lean in, right? To go in, to be a leader in this movement, despite all of the kickback that you were getting from, on all kinds of shit. What was that journey like from between 2016 and when you started Lift Our Voices?
Busy.
Yeah, I'm sure.
It's so funny because, thank you for saying that. I had a lot of, friends who said to me, you've been through so much, why don't you just spend more time with your teenage kids now and just kick back? And I'm like, no, because actually if there's been one constant in my life, it's been that I always go for it. And I saw this massive opportunity in front of me and realized that my voice could make a difference for all the people out there whose voice maybe wasn't as loud and clear. And that's what has been the motivating factor for me. It's not necessarily about getting Gretchen Carlson out of her non-disclosure agreement so I can finally tell all the details of everything that ever happened to me at Fox, although that would be great. It's really about doing this fight for all the people, specifically women, who don't have that same platform or the resources. So that's how I started out. I mean, did I ever dream that I would be a poster child for sexual harassment in the workplace? No, that's not something that you aspire to put on your resume. But when it happened to me, then I was like, okay, so how am I going to change this? The first thing was I did write the book because I wanted to honor these women. Then I started working on the Hill to try and pass legislation. And that was, wow, that goes to show you how tough it is to pass a law. And we introduced it in bipartisan fashion. We're trying to get rid of the two ways that women are silenced in the workplace. I'm going to keep it really simple because it can get complicated.
Yes.
Arbitration clauses in employment agreements. People don't even realize they have them because they've been put in there to make all of us feel like, oh yeah, that's a fair way to handle discrimination and sexual harassment. It's not. So basically what it means is you can't go to a jury. You don't get that, even though that's your Seventh Amendment right. You have to go to this secret chamber called arbitration. And that's how companies keep their problems and their dirty laundry secret. So I'm trying to change that through legislation on the Hill, because giving women that voice and taking them out of secrecy will help to solve this problem. So that was the first thing that I was doing. And then I was speaking all over the country, just trying to educate people about this. And then I did a college campus tour because I really wanted to get to our young people. Then I set up the Gift of Courage Fund, where I monetarily was creating the Gretchen Carlson Leadership Initiative to help underserved women all throughout the country, where they could come to seminars that I put on, where they could get free legal help, and they could build self-esteem, and they could get help if they were being harassed on the job. I was incredibly proud of that because nobody else has cared about those women. They just haven't. So all of this work then morphed into creating organically the nonprofit Lift Our Voices. And the impetus for that was that last fall, NBC was under fire after the Matt Lauer story and other things. And they made an announcement that they were going to let their women there and men who had signed non-disclosure agreements, NDAs, out of them. And a group of us at Fox got together, all of us who had filed lawsuits against Fox, and we said, well, if they're going to let them out, we're going to demand that Fox let us out. And so we put together letters, we demanded to be let out of our NDAs, and we got a lot of media attention about that, although no response from Fox. And then that organically just led into, we should really create an organization about this because nobody else is doing this work. And so now I merged my arbitration work into my NDA work, and it's all under the umbrella of Lift Our Voices. If we can eradicate those two silencing mechanisms in the American workplace, we will change the American workplace for forever. And so our mission now is to educate companies about how detrimental these clauses are to women. And by the way, companies just want to retain women in the workforce, especially now during COVID. I think I saw a number yesterday. American workplace has lost 800,000 women since COVID started. And one of the ways we lose them is through sexual harassment, because they just disappear and they're silenced for forever and ever. So this is the work that we're trying to do to change that. And we've had great victories, so far along the way.
So I reread your book, Be Fierce, a few weeks ago in preparation for this. Fantastic book. I mean, the story, and I say fantastic in a weird roundabout way, because it's full of bad news. Like, it's full of just the reality of what women, it's wild that, women have had to do this for forever, right? They have been subjected to all types of abuse. I'm in the middle of reading Sapiens by Yuval Harari, this amazing history of the world, the history of everything. And in it, he talks about, from as far back, we're talking tens of thousands of years ago, it was still the same thing. It was still, there's all these proof, different stories and different writings and anecdotes and maps and this and that of the same kind of thing. And he throws out different theories for why, men became the dominant sort of species. How did that happen? How did they become the sort of dominators of women and children? And I have this in air quotes for those of you that can't see, the weaker, the weaker gender, right? How did that all happen? It's still a mystery. People have theories, people have ideas, but somewhere along the way, men started taking advantage of women. And it sucks, and it's horrible, and it's wild that it's still happening today. Like in 2020, with all that we know, with all that all the resource, all the time, we can look back at history and see how many times that hasn't worked, and how many times these people in power have their legacy is just shattered. It's ruined. It sucks. And yet they're still trying to do it today. They still think they're going to get away with it, right? And your book just has these, again, these stories of women that you've talked to, women that have been hurt and maligned and abused by those in power. So what I'd love for you to do is spend a couple minutes sort of describing how big this is, right? Because again, a lot of people might say, you know what, a lot of women out there might listen, and I've heard them, I've interacted with them, like, and men as well, that have said, you know what, that it's not as big as people say that it is. My boss has always been great, never touched me, never looked, that never looked sideways at me. So I think women, many of these women, they'll never say all of them, but many of these women are in it for the money. They're in it for the fame. They're in it for their 15 minutes of fame, which is just horseshit when you think about all that comes along with putting your story out there, right?
Right.
How big is this thing, Gretchen? Like how often does this happen? How big is this thing?
So the way I like to describe that is that every woman has a story. Almost every woman does. And really what I'm trying to work on the research side of things for Lift Our Voices is to quantify exactly how many women that is, because nobody's ever cared enough to do research on this. So we don't really have all of the facts, but I can tell you from the thousands of women who've reached out to me that it's everywhere. It's everywhere. It's fast food workers, it's police officers, it's firefighters, it's members of our military, it's Wall Street bankers, it's lawyers, it's doctors, it's airplane mechanics, it's teachers, it's
presidents. It's presidents.
Yes, presidents. Oh, yes. Well, yes, lest we forget that.
Yes.
And so, in fact, that's the number one question I always get is how can Donald Trump be president with the allegations that he had against him and the way in which he treated women? And we're watching CEOs of companies fall. How can that happen, Gretchen? And it's not a private company. Becoming the president of America is left up to the voters of America. Don't get me started on whether or not we should look at human decency over policy, but I believe we should. And that's what I'm trying to teach my kids. But without getting into politics, other than to say a very important point, which is sexual harassment is apolitical. So, number one, almost every woman has a story, unfortunately. Number two, harassment is apolitical. And that's why we should all care about trying to fix it. And what I point to about that is when somebody decides to use their power against you and sexually harass you, they don't ask you what political party you're in. Because you know what? They don't care. This is all about power. And that's why we as a nation, especially in this hyper-partisan time, should be able to come together and try to work on this and solve something for women. I think that this is something that would move us forward leaps and bounds once and for all. So those are the two biggest lessons that I've learned from this. Number three, it's a tangled web to fix. That's why I'm so incredibly busy now, more busy than I was when I was doing a live television cable show every day. Now I'm working on all this advocacy. I'm writing books, I'm giving speeches, I'm doing talks, and I'm doing my television job. And I just started a new podcast. So I'm extra busy, but even though it's a tangled web, through Lift Our Voices, we actually believe we have a silver bullet solution, at least the beginning. And that's what I was talking about earlier, is to eradicate these silencing mechanisms. So for people who say, oh yeah, women just want to be famous, incredibly, the president actually said that. Listen, I'm the first one to tell you that there's nothing good about coming forward. Up until now, where women are actually being believed. But when I did what I did, and when thousands of other women have tried to have their voices heard, there's been nothing good that's happened to them.
Nope.
They're maligned, they're made fun of, they're called whores, they're said, you deserve it, you asked for it, it must have been what you were wearing. Everything, right? Except, oh, maybe she's telling the truth. So the idea that people would risk everything and careers they've killed themselves for and trying to support their families to come forward to make something up, that's a very small percentage of these stories.
Yeah, that's the sucky thing, is that for every Gretchen Carlson who stuck her neck out there and put her story forth, and I'm not even going to even begin to imply that most people believe you. I'm sure you've had your fair share of people not believing all of that, right?
See my social media if you want to get it.
Yeah, exactly. But for every Gretchen Carlson who is believed by and large, and you've been able to rally so many people, right? Men and women alike, left and right and everything in between, to tackle this issue, there's been 1 million women that were not believed, that don't have a job anymore, that are called all those names. Like, that's the tragic part. Is like, we're seeing, I think you're right, something's different about now versus 1960, holding the same signs at the protests, right? I think there is something different now. There are more resources than ever, more ways to get involved than ever, and people are motivated. They're seeing that their voice actually matters and actually counts. But despite all of that, for every Gretchen Carlson, there's still 1 million or 10 million. I don't know.
Right.
I don't know what the numbers are. There are untold numbers of women that are not believed.
Right.
And
that's like number 5. Sorry to interrupt you, but
no, go
it's
for it.
really, really important that of all of those thousands of women who've reached out to me, 99.9% of them never work in their chosen profession ever again after coming forward. And that is outrageous. And that alone is what propels me on a daily basis to keep this movement going. Because what have they done except summoned up the courage to do what was right? And our society rewards them with saying, you will never work again. That's what happens to them, because they go to HR, hypothetically, they finally get the courage to complain. If they have an arbitration clause, HR goes, whew, no one will ever know about this because we're going to keep it secret. We force her into arbitration. We protect the predator. Maybe she gets some sort of a small settlement. I won't even go into how arbitration doesn't help you benefit with any of that. Now you go out and you try and get into the workforce, okay? Now your prospective new employer says, well, could I get a reference from your old employer? And you say, no, that's not going to work out. Well, why? I can't tell you. Well, why not? Well, because, I just can't get into that. Well, so now that employer automatically thinks, wow, she must have done something really bad at that last job, because we can't get a reference from that particular employer, and she can't tell us what happened. So what happens? She never works again. Whether you're a fast food worker or you're a VP of a company, you don't work in your chosen profession. And as Americans, we should not be okay with that. I am not okay with that. And that is why I work every single day to try and make this world safer for women and men in the workplace. And as I'm looking at your face, which is a male, I just want to make sure that I say that we need you. We need men to help us. It's number 6 or whatever number I'm up to. It is so crucial that this is not a male bashing exercise. All the work that I'm doing is actually to invite men into the conversation to help us. Because as long as men still run the majority of Fortune 500 companies and still do the majority of hiring of women, they need to understand how detrimental this problem is, and how if they actually change the way they lead and they actually celebrate women who come forward and bystanders who come forward, that they actually retain women then in the workplace. That's all women want to do. They want to be able to work. That's it. And instead, what we do to women is when they come forward, we put them out to pasture. No, what should happen is women should come forward. The company should have a policy that embraces them coming forward. They do an outside investigation. If the claims are proven to be true by an independent person, the woman gets to keep her job. The predator goes. Now you don't need settlements. You don't need women to sign non-disclosures. You don't throw them into arbitration. No, because now they're still doing their job. That's where we have to get to. And I don't, it sounds so simple when you actually explain it that way. But as you've been talking about during this podcast, changing culture and the way we've thought about things for centuries, it's really, really, really difficult. So, I may have these very simplistic solutions, but incorporating them is difficult.
I want to ask you this. I want to ask you about hope. I want to ask you about where and how you're hopeful. I'm excited about how things are evolving. I think as you've already stated, there are really good things happening right now. And we have more opportunities than ever to give a damn and to make a difference and to demand change. But at the same time, I look at our current landscape. We've had a few dozen, like the highest office in the land, president of the United States. We've had a few dozen of them, all men, mostly white, except for one. And right now we've got this interesting sort of thing happening. it's not a secret. I'm voting for Joe Biden, not because I think he wasn't in my top whatever pick, but I think we need to get Donald Trump out of office for a lot of reasons. That's me speaking personally, and we won't get into my, more politics right now. But you have the two people right now that are contending for the presidency of the United States. One has been accused of sexual assault. And whatever, a lot of people may say it's been credibly debunked, blah, blah, blah. And that's a whole messy thing, right? Then you got the other, our current president, who it's not one, it's so many allegations. We have, because he's such a big mouth, you have so many things on record. Him saying to Howard Stern years ago, because I'm the owner of this pageant, I can walk in on these underage girls, while they're dressing.
Right.
You've got him saying that he wants to have sex with his daughter. You've got all these allegations, and we're talking dozens at this point. So I want to be hopeful. I want to believe that things can change. But then you look at the highest office in the land, and then you look at who's supporting this man for his reelection, and you see millions and millions of people that claim to follow Jesus, right? Jesus of all people. Even if you're not a Christian, you know the person of Jesus, and you read the stories and you see the historical facts. And this guy, Jesus, was a good man that advocated for the marginalized and against the rich and powerful. And they're saying they follow that guy, but also want Donald Trump to be reelected. And so we've got this it's very hard. Here's what I'm saying. It's very hard to feel hopeful right now in my mind that even on this topic that we're addressing today in the show, it's hard to feel hopeful that things are going to change because we have two old white men fighting for the highest office in the land. Both of them, one way more than the other, but both of them have been credibly accused of sexual assault. So where are you finding, all these things, I'm not telling you anything new. Where are you finding hope that things are changing and that we are moving forward and that all your work over the next 40, 50, 60 years is not going to be in vain?
Well, first of all, let me go back to what I said earlier, that what you just described about the political landscape is exactly what I said earlier, that for whatever reason, there are millions of people out there who are putting their political beliefs and policies like tax reform, immigration, whatever it might be that they feel passionately about, they're putting that ahead of human decency. And I don't believe that's a great life lesson to give to our kids.
Mm-mm.
So I wrote a New York Times op-ed about it. I'll just end there on it. Otherwise we'll go down a whole nother rabbit hole.
Right.
But I have to be hopeful because I live this. I jumped off the cliff. I'm doing this on behalf of all the other women in the world who've never been heard from before. And every morning when I wake up, there are days I don't feel hopeful. But I look down on my wrist in a bracelet that I wear that says, "Be fierce." And those two words, they motivate me, whether I'm tired or whatever the case may be, and I don't feel like doing anything that day. They motivate me to remember that this is my mission. And I actually, even with all this crap going on, I actually 100% believe that we're going to solve this. I believe that through Lift Our Voices, we're going to eradicate arbitration clauses and we're going to eradicate NDAs for toxic workplace issues, not company secrets. I want to be clear about that, but toxic workplace issues. I believe if we can do those two things, that we will significantly change the landscape of the American workplace. That's a huge statement. That is a huge statement. It will be easier to solve than pay inequity. And who thinks that, like, what the hell? Pay the woman the same that you pay the man. I don't get it. For the same job, right? But we haven't been able to do that.
Nope.
So I actually believe that my work and changing these two things, getting rid of them, will actually happen before pay inequity gets solved. And they're all intertwined. They're all intertwined because when you actually pay women fairly and promote them and put them in higher positions, guess what doesn't happen? Sexual harassment. They're all intertwined. So I have to remain hopeful. And I'll just end my hope soliloquy on the fact that I have two children. I'm blessed to have a girl and a boy. They're both teenagers. And I have seen my courage transfer to them. And that is what gives me hope on a daily basis. That we thought we had solved this in my generation, and we had not. But when I look in their faces, when I look at their faces and when I look into their eyes, And when I see them doing courageous things that they say, Mommy, I'm doing that because I saw you do it, that motivates me to keep going. And you know what? If I only changed those 2 lives, it would have been worth it. But it is so much more. And so it's for the future generations that I get up every day and roll up my sleeves and get to work.
I love that. I love everything about what you just shared. Speak for 20 to 30 seconds, and that's a very unfair time frame, but speak to 20 to 30 seconds to, I guess I could say men and women, because, sexual harassment happens to both, but we know it's mostly women. So I'll just say it this way. Speak to anyone listening right now that has been sexually harassed in their workplace. They're scared for all the reasons you know about more than anyone. They're scared. They've kept silent. They want to keep their job. They don't want their life upended and disrupted. And again, I know that's super unfair to say 20 to 30 seconds, but speak to them real quickly and give them a word of encouragement and maybe point them in the right direction. Again, our conversation will do that, but right now, just speak to them.
So know that you're not alone. As I said, almost every woman has a story. The company wants you to make you feel like you're alone, but you're not. In my book, chapter 4 is a playbook. I encourage people to rip it out and put it in their back pocket. Number 1, gather evidence. You have to have evidence. Number 2, call an outside lawyer. You can go to betterbrave.com and other organizations to get free lawyers to at least give you that initial advice. You must do that. Don't go to HR first. Number 3, tell somebody. Tell somebody. You have to tell somebody so that you have another person who can vouch for you that you told them that on this particular date and at this time, this happened to you. And make sure you take all that evidence home. So many people have reached out to me to tell me that they gathered all this evidence, and then when they finally went to complain, they got fired. They were not allowed to go back to their office, and there was all the evidence. And therefore, they, went home and could never prove what had happened to them. Those are the top 3 and 4 things. And for other people who aren't being sexually harassed, you're as big a part of this equation as those who are. Believe people. Go to your HR departments and ask, do we have arbitration clauses here? Do we make people sign NDAs that shut them up? Because 60 million Americans have arbitration clauses, and 1/3 of all Americans sign NDAs the day they start a job. You can get together, you can go to HR, you can make a change. And I'll leave you with this. My favorite quote is, one woman can make a difference, but together we rock the world. And that is what we're seeing happening right now, is that one woman or one man's voice is so powerful and can enact change. But together, collectively, when we come together, that's where we move mountains.
I have 2 daughters that are 6 and 7. And I'm so glad that they're growing up in a world where Gretchen Carlson is leading the way, and where Gretchen Carlson can inspire them to lead the way, right? Because it won't, I love your optimism that things are going to change in your lifetime. And I hope to God you're right. But there'll still be work to do when they're older, right? There'll still be work to do in 10, 15, 20 years to make this, this a reality where this doesn't exist anymore. It's incredible. You mentioned earlier that you have a podcast and a show that you're on right now. Describe what those are so people can go check them out.
Thank you. So I need to be a beacon of hope for all those women I was telling you about who never work again. That's why it was so important for me to go back to what I love, which is TV, and to venture into something new, which is podcasting, like you are. So I am a special contributor for the new People TV show, and I'm so excited because People is such an iconic brand and one that can be trusted. And so I'm looking forward to doing stories about inspirational people for people. And then I just started my new daily news podcast on quakemedia.com/Gretchen. Go check it out. It's down the middle news. We need down the middle news right now. So many people say to me, where can I just get the facts? And I'm like, my podcast. And that's actually what the idea was for my podcast, for really not any opinion, but just the straight headlines. And, with my personality thrown in. So quakemedia.com/Gretchen. Thanks for having me, Nick.
I love this. I love this. Real quickly, do you have 2 more seconds?
Of course.
This is coming out on November 3, Election Day. The biggest election of my lifetime so far. Just wild for a million reasons. I recently saw this thing that you were in the Lily online 15 women sharing their first time voting stories. You shared the article with Latasha Brown and Judy Raphael and a bunch of other amazing women. Real quickly, what's your advice to anyone that hasn't voted before, that is torn up about what's happening, that doesn't know who to vote for? Like, what do you encourage them right now? Again, some people are going to listen to this after election day because they save it up for later in the week. But what's your advice to voters in this really truly historic election?
Well, listen, you can't complain about the outcome if you don't speak your mind. I mean,
Yeah.
no matter who you're going to vote for, and I think we're seeing record numbers of people going early to vote. And listen, it's a privilege to be able to vote in this wonderful, great country for the most part. And so go have your voice heard. I just said my favorite quote: "One woman can make a difference, but together we rock the world." That's what voting's all about. And one vote actually will probably make a difference in this election. So vote. I used to take my kids with me all the time so that they would watch me vote. It's so important. And if you've never done it before, there's always a first time.
My kids already at 5, 6, and 7 years old know more about politics in the world and voting and just getting involved than I did. And I'm not shitting you. Like, I was 20, 22 years old before, because my parents just didn't get involved. They already know. They've been voting with us.
Right.
They've been to marches and been to rallies. And so, it's so supremely important. Gretchen Carlson, you're amazing. Thank you so much for the time. Thank you so much for being with us. And maybe we'll do it again sometime.
I did that.
When we're in the same place, post-pandemic, when all this is safe again.
Thanks for being a warrior for women. It's really, really important. And I'd love spending time with you. So thank you, Nick.
My friends, I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. I'm such a huge fan of this woman. A massive thanks to Gretchen Carlson for joining us today. There's so much to learn from her powerful life and work. Visit letsgiveadamn.fm for resources and links, and thank you all for listening. I'm truly honored that you come back week after week after week to listen to these conversations. I get these notes all the time: text, email, social media, DMs. I get these messages where people are sharing how Let's Give a Damn is affecting them, how these conversations are affecting them, how they're making them better, how they're provoking them in different ways. And I even hear feedback about things where they disagreed with me or my guest, right? Please keep sending that, because it means that you're listening, and I love that. This episode was edited and produced by Chad Michael Snavely and the team at Sound On, Sound Off Studios. Let's Give a Damn is part of the Matter Media family. You can reach out to me anytime at hello@letsgiveadamn.com or text me at 646-328-6414. Sending love and peace to each one of you. Stay safe. Keep giving a damn. Bye for now.